Turn that thing off. All right. Glad that you are here this morning. It's great to have all of you with us today at the Heron Church of Christ. Did anyone come a little bit ready to hear from God's Word this morning? Anybody? Okay. All right. Glad you're here. I love it. We're in a message series called The Good Work, based on an incredible story from the Old Testament about a very ordinary guy. His name was Nehemiah. Now, I want to set up the message today by giving you some thoughts, perhaps about you. And then we're going to dive in and believe that God's going to speak to us through His Word. Here is what I'm guessing that I know about many of you. I'm guessing that there's probably something that bothers you when you see it in the world. Some injustice, something that weighs on you, perhaps on behalf of others. It might be a need that you see that you think somebody should be meeting and they're not meeting. It might be a group of people that are hurting, maybe those who have been abused. There's probably, for many of you, what we might call a divine burden, something that disturbs you, something that upsets you on behalf of God. Well, here's what I found, if you're taking notes about our burdens, and that is this: the burden you bear often reveals the calling that you will embrace. The burden you bear often reveals the calling that you will embrace. In other words, the thing that tends to upset you will often drive you or compel you into ministry to make a difference in someone's life. What I also know about you is this: that you rarely ever know when you're on the front end of something really special. You rarely know when you're on the front end of really making a significant difference. That's exactly where some of you are right now at this moment. You're bothered by something. You see it happening and you can't do much about it. At least that's been your thought so far. You see a need. You're considering doing something about it, or maybe you're just in the early stages of starting. You have no idea that you could be on the front end of something very, very special that would impact the lives of people. I hope this message will encourage you in your life. The Babylonians completely destroyed Jerusalem. The lifestyle, the values, the temple was destroyed. They destroyed everything. The Babylonians crushed their spirits. They demoralized them beyond any hope whatsoever. They took many of them captive. If you fast forward a few decades later, some of the Jewish people were finally released out of captivity to go back to Jerusalem and rebuild the homeland. Now, if you can imagine, they're going back to a demolished city, a city that doesn't exist except in ruins and rubble. There's no economic structure. There are no systems, no government, no direction. And most of all, there's no hope. So these early travelers went and they tried to rebuild, but they hit a dead end. They couldn't get anything going at all. 140 years after the destruction, an ordinary guy, just an everyday guy named Nehemiah, is suddenly brokenhearted for the plight of his people, for the condition of his city. And I want to tell you again, he was not a preacher, he was not a priest, he was not a contractor, he wasn't even verified on Instagram. He was nothing, just an average, ordinary guy. This guy was just getting going. He was an ordinary servant. In other words, he didn't have any formal or appointed position. He didn't have to wait on someone to ask him to do it. He was just an average, ordinary guy who saw a need, and it bothered him until he decided to do something about it. All he had was God-ordained passion. I don't know who this is going to speak to, but there are some of you that are listening right now that you don't have a position, you haven't been commissioned, but what you do have is passion. And that passion comes from God. And it's about something that matters. Now, if you were here with us last week, we saw that Nehemiah got his heart broken over the condition of his people in his city. And the first thing he did was sit down to cry. He wept. He mourned for quite some time, and then he knelt down to pray. 12 different times in the book of Nehemiah, he stops and he prays. We see him petitioning the God of heaven. And then finally, he stands up to act. And he said, somebody's got to do something about this. It might as well be me. So how do you do the work? That's what we're asking this morning. How do you do the work? How do you make a difference? I want to give you 4 thoughts today. We're going to get very, very practical. We're going to let the Spirit of God empower us to do the work and make a difference. The first thing you're going to want to do is this. Number 1, I think this is on the screen. We're going to seek God faithfully. That's what you're going to do first and foremost. Seek God faithfully. Again and again and again and again. We're going to see Nehemiah going before God and praying time and time and time again. In fact, let me kind of give you the timeline so you'll understand what's happening here. He prays all the way to the month of Nisan. That's not the car, that's the Hebrew month, Nisan. This is 4 months. He is in the month of Kislev. He prays all the way to the month of Nisan. That's 4 months. He's also fasting. He's hurting. He is seeking the God of heaven. And why is he doing it? He's asking God to lead his steps. It's impossible to describe how tricky it would have been for a cupbearer. That's Nehemiah's position. That's his job. He's the wine taster, the taster of the food to make sure it isn't poison. That's his job before the king. And as he does that job, it's tricky for him to approach the king with a request, because the cupbearer's only job is to take burdens off the king, not add burdens to the king. It's never to deliver any kind of difficult news. That's not his job. The only time he's going to deliver difficult news is when he drops dead because somebody poisoned the wine. In fact, for Mideastern kings, you would take bad news and never deliver it to them. Because if you deliver bad news, you're probably going to lose your head. You didn't want to be the person to ever deliver anything but good news. And so he's in a very difficult place. In verse 1 of chapter 2, here's what happens. He describes it this way. He says, I had not been sad in the king's presence before. I think this is up on the screen. I had not been sad. It's there at the end of verse 1. The first part of it is that part about the months, 4 months and all of that, and the king. He says, I had not been sad in the king's presence before. So the king notices, and the king asks Nehemiah, why does your face look sad when you're not ill? This can be nothing but sadness of heart. That implies that these two men had some kind of relationship. These two cared at least a little bit about each other, because the king is concerned for his servant. He's disturbed in spirit, and the king can tell. Verse 4, Nehemiah says, the king said to me, what is it you want? And watch him again. How many times do you see this? Then I prayed to the God of heaven. You're going to see it 12 times in the short book of Nehemiah. Then I prayed to the God of heaven. And what I hope you'll notice is this. This is not a 4-day prayer retreat. This is not a 4-month-long prayer retreat. This is just a quick flash prayer, if you will. He's already had his long prayer retreat. This is a man who's walking intimately with God, and now he just wants to talk to God before he does something, before he says something. That's the kind of guy Nehemiah is. Before I say this, let me pray about it. I hope that you'll pray both ways. I hope that you'll pray long prayer retreats where you'll spend months in prayer, and I hope that you'll take a moment before you say something to stop and pray. Because that's Nehemiah. We've already been talking. Nehemiah says, we're not catching up on our devotion time. We're walking intimately together. God, I need help. God, give me the words. God, direct my steps. God, show me what to do, what to say. And here he is in the presence of the king, and the king says, Nehemiah, why do you look so sad? What is it you want? Oh, God, help me say the right thing. And he says, I prayed to the God of heaven, and I answered the king. I hope you'll remember about prayer that there's nothing too big for God in prayer. Nothing too big, nothing too small. God, I need to say the right thing. Help me here. Put words in my mouth. He cares about all of it. If it's a burden to you, you take it to God. You seek God faithfully. Nothing too small for his heart. You start by seeking God faithfully. God, I need you. God, direct me. For 4 months, Nehemiah has faithfully sought after God. And I want to tell somebody here, you have a heart for something. God has put a burden on your heart, and he's filled you with passion. And what are you going to do with it? Well, the first thing you're going to do is seek God's guidance. You have a vision for something. If prayer isn't necessary for you to accomplish your vision, you're not thinking big enough. You want something so big, so full of faith, that you need the power of God to get you through it. So what do? How do you do the work? How do you make a difference? You seek God faithfully. The second thing you do is define the vision clearly. Define the vision clearly. I hope you'll understand, for most people, it's not a lack of caring that's the problem. They care a whole bunch. It's a lack of clarity. It isn't being defined, not specifically. When it's what you're called to do, you need to define it specifically. I want to show you this, and I want you to watch the crystal clear clarity of an ordinary man with a vision for God. Watch what he says. The king says, Nehemiah, I can see you're upset. What is it you want me to do? Nehemiah says in verse 4, if it pleases the king, and if your servant has found favor in his sight. Now watch this. Let him send me to the city in Judah, where my ancestors are buried, so that I can rebuild it. You know what it took? The guts it took, the courage it took. This guy is a slave, a servant who is willing to die for his king. Would you mind sending me on an extended vacation? Would you mind giving me up? Could you take somebody else to be your guinea pig, your canary in the mine? Can you get another cupbearer, somebody else to drink the wine? I'm tired of doing this. Can you send me back home? One sentence. Absolute clarity. What did he say? Please send me to Judah so I can rebuild the walls. Clarity. Seek God faithfully. Define the vision clearly. Now, let me tell you what Nehemiah didn't do. And I don't mean to be rude and make fun of anybody, but this is what a lot of us do. He didn't say, Nehemiah, what do you want me to do? Well, King, there's something I've been thinking about for quite some time, okay? My Aunt Martha, she's from Jerusalem, and she's got 3 kids, and one of them's name is Mickey, and Mickey sent me this article about the people, and I read about it, and I was kind of confused because there's some big words, but I looked them up on Wikipedia, and I figured all of that out, and now I know what it is, and so I'm thinking, King, I might do this mission trip to go there, and kind of see how things are, and to be honest, I'm getting kind of tired of pouring your wine all the time and drinking it to see if it's poisonous or not. And it might kill me and stuff. And you didn't even send me a Christmas card this year, and I'm kind of mad at you, so I'd like to leave. That is not what Nehemiah did. He is not thinking, I might just kind of, see how it goes over there. I'm not really sure yet, but Mickey and Martha say, since I know you and everything, you're the king, I thought I'd bring this idea before you and see what you thought about it. So what do you think? That's not what he did. For most of you, it isn't caring that's the problem. It's the lack of clarity. That's, by the way, my redneck Jewish impression. Maybe it's not so good, but that's it. And I don't even know what a lot of this stuff is that I was talking about, but I think it's what a lot of us do. We lack clarity. We're not sure exactly what we want to do. So what is it you want to do? What is God calling you to do? Some of you want to help children. Okay, then help children. How? Which children? Those that don't have their basic needs met, those that can't read, those that don't have homes. Where? In your city? Or in a foreign country? Which children do you want to help? In some other country in the world? What is it very specifically that God is calling you to do? The bottom line is, if you can't define it, you can't do it. If God is calling you to do it, take a moment and define it clearly. What do you want me to do, God? In a sentence, incredibly clearly. You might say, God is leading me to lead our family to be completely debt-free except for our mortgage by the year 2022. That's clear. That's definable. God is leading me to have a personal conversation about Jesus with every student in my class before I graduate by 2021. That's clear. God is calling me, honestly, our church, to eradicate Bible poverty. Let's pick a year. What year do we want to eradicate Bible poverty and have a Bible in every home in this community? Well, they probably already have one. But if they don't, let's make sure they do. That's just an example. Define what you want to do clearly. Seek God faithfully. Define the vision clearly. And number 3, make plans carefully. Make plans carefully. The problem is that a goal without a plan is just a wish. Some of you are just wishing. So make a plan. Honor God. Sometimes the most spiritual thing you can do is get organized. You know God is a systematic God. You get a master's degree in theology, and you think, oh man, that's so easy. You sit in classes and you study Matthew and then Mark and Luke. You've been studying those your whole life. Well, let me ask you to go take systematic theology with Dr. Randy Harris. That is beyond a shadow of doubt the hardest class that I ever took. That includes Hebrew, Greek, all the other stuff. Systematic theology. God is a systematic God. We live in a solar system. You know how complex this solar system is? And you know who designed it, who created it? 7 days a week, every week. There's not 8 some weeks, some 6 some weeks. There's not 372 days in a year some years, and certain amount of other years. Nehemiah asked the king, will you give me some protection, please? He is very carefully planning this thing out. Send letters to those who are in charge. And then he says, and may I have a letter to Asaph, keeper of the royal park, so he'll give me timber to make the beams for the gates of the citadel by the temples, and for the city wall, and for the residence that I will occupy. He starts laying out his plans. You can see it up on the screen, verses 7 and 8. What does he do? He asks for protection. He asks for provision. He's very clear. I need protection to travel. I need provision to build. And then he says, and because the gracious hand of my God was on me, the king granted my request. What did he do? He sought God. He was led by the Spirit of God, and God came through. He was incredibly clear on what he was going to do. He created a plan, and he said, this is how I'm going to accomplish it. Now you might say, I want to create a plan, but I don't really know how to have a perfect plan. Well, I always tell people that the plan doesn't have to be perfect. I'd rather execute a good plan today with passion than a perfect plan months from now without any passion. You just kind of got to get the ball moving. You got to start somewhere. You know what my plan is all the time? Just do the next right thing. Whatever that is. Just do the next right thing. That's my plan. If I look at how do we rebuild these walls and how do we get the Bible out there, and that overwhelms me. So just do the next right thing, whatever that is. Step by step. Faithfulness by faithfulness. In fact, to me, success is not in achieving some accomplishment way out there in the future. It's just doing what's right next. Success is being faithful and doing the right thing today. Be clear. What's your plan? Do the next right thing and execute it. What's the next right thing for you? See, the next right thing for you might be different than it is for me. You want to start a ministry? You want to do the next right thing? Have a meeting with someone else who's doing what you want to be doing. Take a tour. Come up with questions. Don't dare do all the talking. Do all the listening. You know what we need? And I've been saying this for weeks. We need a video ministry team. I know that's waiting on somebody. I know somebody is thinking, I can do that. Listen to a podcast. Watch a YouTube video. You want to get a date? Oh, God sent me to help you this morning. Look, I asked her out for weeks. She kept telling me, I'm going out with somebody else. So I'd given up. Pretty soon I get a phone call. Hey, you want to go to a movie? She'll deny it. She won't tell you she asked me out. She called me up. Hey, you want to go to a movie? I started to say, no, I'm going out with somebody else. Glad I didn't do that. Take a bath. That's the first step. That's the next right thing. You want a date? Go take a bath. Put some deodorant on. Don't put the cheap, smelly stuff that you buy at Walmart. Go get some good stuff. I know the teenagers always say, yuck. And I'm like, right back at you. That stuff you wear is awful. Take a bath. Buy a shirt with some color on it. You thought the inside of my jacket was going to match, didn't you? No, it's just a golf shirt, but there's a little bit of color. Of course, she looked at me and this morning she said, now I'm embarrassing myself. Number 4, inspire people passionately. You inspire people passionately. I want to warn you with what's coming next week, because next week is challenging. What we're going to see is he had a whole lot of opposition. Hardcore critics and haters, but that's next week. You stand up with whatever faith you have, and you inspire people passionately to get involved with whatever it is, with that burden that you have. All things are possible with God. Watch what Nehemiah does. He says to them, he acknowledges things aren't going so well. He says, you see the trouble we're in? I like that. It's authentic. He's telling the truth. He's not sweeping it under the rug. He's not pretending it's all hidden. You see the trouble we're in? Jerusalem lies in ruins. Its gates have been burned with fire. And then what does he say? Come. An invitation. Come on. Everybody, people who believe, people from our homeland, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, He is our God. Let us rebuild the walls of Jerusalem, and we will no longer be in disgrace. And then he says, I also told them about the gracious hand of my God on me, and what the king said to me. God is with us. God is working through us. Inspire the people around you to believe that God is for what you're doing, that God is with you. He'll never forsake you. He'll never leave you. He's empowering us. He's opening doors that we don't have the power to open ourselves. He's giving us favor with the hearts of people. Our God is with us. Inspire people passionately. I like what John Wesley said. He said some people would call him some people would call John Wesley the founder of the Methodist Church. That's where you've heard that name before. But this is what he said. Light yourself on fire with passion, and people will come from miles to watch you burn. Somebody here is trying to play with a little bit of gasoline. I don't mean that literally. I mean symbolically. You're trying to light yourself on fire. You're trying to light a fire and inspire people to get involved, and let's go do this. Inspire people. One of my favorite things to do is help our church to see, to inspire you with what's possible. You know who needs grace? Well, I'm asking you, do you know who needs grace? Invite them. Next week, love them. Get them in the presence of God. Bring them next weekend. You know somebody who needs it. Nehemiah says, I told them about the favor of our God and how He moved the heart of our King. Whatever it is that you care about, that burden, what if it's not an accident? What if it's not a coincidence? What if God is trusting in you? Because it bothers you more than it bothers everybody else. Maybe it's because you've been given an assignment that no one else has. It's all yours, straight from God. The burden that you bear often reveals the calling that you embrace. An ordinary person, you don't feel qualified? Congratulations, you're the exact kind of person that God loves to use. How do you make a difference? How do you do the work? You seek God faithfully. You define the vision clearly. You make plans carefully. You inspire people passionately. And then you step out and do what you do. You watch God do more through you than you ever imagined. If you would bow with me, let's pray. Father, do that in us. Do it through us. I pray today, God, that this would not just inspire somebody, but perhaps equip them to do a good work and to make a difference in this world, in this community. We know there's something more. We're ready to act. Help us to do the next right thing, whatever it is. We want to do it. Help us, Father. Give us the strength, the courage, the fire. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.